Ew. Second time live. So today it's Bill's story, an AA Alcoholics Anonymous in the fourth edition big book. We've done the preface, forward to the first, second, third, fourth edition, the doctor's opinion, and you know, I'm just reading the big book, the first 164 pages. Um, and putting it on YouTube. It is what it is. I like reading it, and maybe there's somebody somewhere that'll stumble upon this at some point in existence and could get something out of it. I don't know. I used to go to this big book meeting in Hallandale, and I can't remember the guy's name, but every Thursday, I think it was, big book study. That's all that was ever happening for years and years and years and years and years. Just first 164, go back through. And that guy was awesome, dude. He was like a British guy. That was a great meeting. All right. So this is Bill's story, technically chapter one. So as I talked about before, reading books for me, in high school, college, whatever it was. I never read the preface. I never read a foreword. I never read a note from the author. I would just skip to chapter one. Now, had I done that in this case, had we done that, we would have missed a lot of cool information. Um, so I'm gonna try to just see how it goes. All right. So this is Bill's story, chapter one. I don't know why this keeps doing this. All right. War fever ran high in the New England town to which we knew young officers from Plattsburgh were assigned, and we were flattered when the first citizens took us to their homes, making us feel heroic. So this is Bill Wilson's story. Okay. Um, Bill Wilson, one of the founders of AA, and this is his story. Okay, so what you would do is you're reading this book and you imagine, okay, like you could look up a picture of Bill Wilson online or something, but imagine this dude is sitting over here in the corner and you're like, hey man, so I think I might be an alcoholic. Um, what's your deal? Like, how did you figure out you were an alcoholic? And how did this whole AA shit come to pass? How did you do this? Um, and he'd probably tell you something like, I was just a drunk like you. But this is Bill's story. So this is World War I. When he's talking about war fever ran high in the New England town to which we knew young officers from Plattsburgh were assigned. And we were flattered when the first citizens took us to their homes. I think Bill was born in 1890 something, 1896 or something like that. So he's probably 1896, 1906, you know, late teens here in this case. And he's like off to war, right? But he's in New England training and all that stuff. He's not overseas at this point. But he's in the army, feels important. The people are flattering them and making them feel heroic. And they're just haven't even left yet, but okay. Here was love, applause, war, moments sublime with intervals hilarious. I was a part of life at last. And in the midst of the excitement, I discovered liquor. Okay, so there it is. So you said, hey, Bill, hello there. Thanks for hanging out for a second. Um, Tell me about what happened with you, man. Like you're the founder of AA. What was your life like? And you would imagine him sitting in the corner there. And he says, war fever ran high in this New England town to which we knew. No, that's not what he sounded like, but he's explaining. So, joined the army. He's up in New England training. People are treating him like a hero already. He's with a bunch of guys, his age and whatnot. And he discovered liquor. Okay. I forgot the strong warnings and the prejudices of my people concerning drink. In time, we sailed for over there, which is in quotes. That's a song that was popular at the time, which would be Europe. So, in time, we sailed for over there. I was very lonely and again turned to alcohol. Okay, so he discovered liquor. He's a young soldier. He was very lonely and again turned to alcohol. We landed in England. I visited Winchester Cathedral. Much moved, I wandered outside. My attention was caught by a doggerel on an old tombstone, so like engraved on a tombstone. And it said this. So he remembers this his whole life. He's recounting this moment when he's at Winchester Cathedral as a young man, newly exposed to alcohol, feeling lonely, drinking, arguably maybe too much. And he wanders outside through an old grave site, an old graveyard cemetery outside of this beautiful cathedral, and he reads this engraving on an old tombstone, which says, "Here lies a Hampshire grenadier who caught his death drinking cold small beer. A good soldier is ne'er forgot, whether he dieth by musket or by pot." So in this case, pot is probably booze, right? So it's a tombstone that he recalls reading. He remembers reading it. Um, which basically said, "Here lies a soldier who died from drinking, not by war." Right? Um, here lies a Hampshire grenadier who caught his death drinking cold small beer. A good soldier is ne'er forgot, whether he dieth by musket or by pot, which is booze, right? Ominous warning, he says, which I failed to heed. 22, oh, there we go. And a veteran of foreign wars, I went home at last. Okay, so he doesn't talk about his war, right? His war experience. He just kind of fast forwards to returning to the United States. So 22, and a veteran of foreign wars, I went home at last. I fancied myself a leader, for had not the men of my battery given me a special token of appreciation. My talent for leadership, I imagined, would place me at the head of vast enterprises, which I would manage with the utmost assurance. So, a little cocky. I took a night law course and obtained employment as an investigator for a surety company. The drive for success was on. So he took a night law course. He got a job as a guy that like tries to see if businesses would be successful or not. The drive for success was on. I'd prove to the world I was important. So I wonder if anyone else has ever felt like that. I'd prove to the world that I was important. My work took me about Wall Street, and little by little, I became interested in the market, the stock market. Many people lost money, but some became very rich. Why not I? I studied economics and business as well as law. Potential alcoholic that I was, I nearly failed my law course. At one of the finals, I was too drunk to think or write. So already early 20s, the drive for success is on, but he's saying potential alcoholic that I was. So maybe not full blown at this point, but his drinking is definitely problematic. He nearly failed his law course. At one of the finals, he was too drunk to think or write. Okay. Though my drinking was not yet continuous, it disturbed my wife. We had long talks when I would still her forebodings by telling her that men of genius conceived their best projects when drunk, that the most majestic constructions of philosophical thought were so derived. Okay, so he's saying, chill, chill, baby, right? Men of great genius drink. The greatest ideas man has ever come up with were derived through this alcohol elixir. Like he's like very much like grandeur and um whatever, romanticizing it. Like, he's drunk all the he's drinking too much. And he's like, "Don't worry, baby. Great men of genius drink like this." Like, we've done that, I'm sure. Have you ever done that? If you're an alcoholic, you've done something like that in your mind at least. I'm Edgar Allan Poe, damn it. I'm Hunter S. Thompson. I'm, John Daly. I'm a legend, right? Nah, maybe I just drink too much and I'm acting like a fool. But whatever. So by the time I had completed the course, I knew the law was not for me. So he completed the course, gave up on law. The inviting maelstrom of Wall Street had me in its grip. Business and financial leaders were my heroes. Out of this alloy of drink and speculation, I commenced to forge the weapon that would one day turn its flight like a boomerang and all but cut me to ribbons. So, this is a very poetic way to say that, like, this alloy of drink. Okay. So, what he's saying is alcohol gave him like this armor. Okay. That he commenced to forge a weapon. Okay. That would one day turn its flight like a boomerang and cut him to ribbons, all but cut him to ribbons. So, the poetic, like, if we make sense of what he's saying and put it in like common day terms, so for a lot of us, drinking is our superpower. It's our armor, it's our protection, it's our confidence, it's our creativity. It is, hello to everyone reading the big book, right? Um, Drinking is like our protection, armor, confidence, creativity, happiness, personality, social, life of the party, funny, whatever it gives us, that we like, and then we perfect it. So what he's saying is like, I commenced to forge the weapon. So it's like you imagine he's forging this sword or something, right? That he uses to, bust his way through life. And we'll read. I mean, at times become very successful for periods of time and do crazy shit that people thought was impossible, right? So that's what alcohol did for him. But then one day, this incredible sword that I have created that has allowed me to just bust my way through life through drinking, it turns its flight on him like a boomerang and all but cuts him to ribbons. So the same thing that allowed him to be wildly successful is what inevitably brings about his downfall, which I think is true for a lot of us if we are alcoholic. Um, so that's what he's saying in a very poetic way, right? And I have that highlighted because I like that. I like that line. Out of this alloy of drink and speculation, I commenced to forge the weapon that would one day turn its flight like a boomerang and all but cut me to ribbons. So, in like simple, I perfected this thing through drinking that eventually came and bit me in the ass, right? And ended up being my greatest liability. Living modestly, my wife and I saved $1,000. So in like the 20s, that would be equivalent to today's money, like 15, 16, 17 grand. I went into certain securities, then cheap and rather unpopular. So, like investments, I guess. I rightly imagined that they would someday have a great rise. So he was correct. He invested in stuff that blew up. I failed to persuade my broker friends to send me out looking over factories and managements, but my wife and I decided to go anyway. I had developed a theory that most people lost money in stocks through ignorance of markets. I discovered many more reasons later on. So this is what I'm talking about. He's working for like a brokerage. He's telling them, "Hey, you should invest in that. You should invest in that." And he's right. He's making good calls, and then he tries to get them to like pay for him basically to go research companies, find out what the next good investment would be. But he says he failed to convince his broker friends that that was a good idea. So he said, fuck it. And he and his wife, Lois, did it anyway. Okay. Um, We gave up our positions and off we roared on a motorcycle. The sidecar stuffed with tent, blanket, a change of clothes, and three huge volumes of financial reference service. So he's working for a brokerage. He said, "Hey, you guys should send me out to do all this research." They said, "Nah, bro, we're not going to do that." So he said, "All right, fuck it." Sold his house, sold his shit, put his wife on a motorcycle, and they went and started researching companies, okay, on their own. Our friends thought a lunacy commission should be appointed, right? Which means like these people are crazy. Perhaps they were right. I had had some success in speculation, so we had a little money, but we once worked on a farm for a month to avoid drawing on our small capital. That was the last honest manual labor on my part for many a day. So we covered the whole eastern United States in a year. And at the end of it, my reports to Wall Street procured me a position there and the use of a large expense account. The exercise of an option brought in more money, leaving us with a profit of several $1,000s for that year. Okay. So what he's saying is they did this crazy thing. They went out on a motorcycle. They, researched different companies and farms and different things, whatever it was at the time, came back to Wall Street to his broker buddies. And he's like, "Hey, man, I got all this data that shows you which of these companies would be a good investment." It worked. His information was correct. So they go, "Bill, hey buddy, come into the big office. Here's an expense account. Here's some money. So he made it. His idea paid off. He says the exercise of an option, he basically bought a stock or something at a set price and whatever. Look up what an option is. Whatever, dude. But more money, right? It brought in more money, leaving them with a profit of several thousand. So if they saved up 1,000 and that was like 15 grand at the time, like our money, if we were saying like for us with inflation and all that, today's money would be we saved 15 grand. So they ended that year with a profit of several thousand. Okay. So like, 45,000, 50 grand or something for the year in our money, right? In our money today. So it's like we go out, we did this thing and we made 50 grand profit, which I guess is pretty damn good. Um, for the next few years, fortune threw money and applause my way. I had arrived. My judgment and ideas were followed by many to the tune of paper millions. So Bill is saying he made it, dude. He was successful. He's a veteran of a foreign war. He's a young man. I think he was like a second lieutenant, which is like a leadership position. It's not a super high rank necessarily, but higher rank than I've ever had. Um, Second lieutenant, he was a leader. He said like his platoon mates or the people he led, said nice things about him. So he came back. He said, "Yo, I'm taking the world by storm. Yeah, my drinking is probably a little bit much, but he was just a dog. You know what I mean?" His ideas were successful. His, you know, his risks that he took were paying off. My judgment and ideas were followed by many to the tune of paper millions. The great boom of the late 20s was seething and swelling. Drink was taking an important and exhilarating part in my life. There was loud talk in the jazz places uptown. Everyone spent in the thousands and chattered in the millions. Scoffers could scoff and be damned. I made a host of fair weather friends. So he's saying, I'm a millionaire. I'm out partying. I'm in the jazz clubs. The late 20s is booming. Everything's good. Now we know what's about to happen now. Everyone spent in thousands, chattered in millions. Scoffers could scoff and be damned. So what that means is like today's terminology, scoffer would be hater. Haters could hate and be damned, right? That's what he was saying. Let the haters hate, baby. My ideas are paying off. You know, I'm drinking, I'm partying, I'm having a good time, and I'm the fucking man. That's Bill Wilson here in the late 20s. My drinking assumed more serious proportions, so it progresses, it gets worse. My drinking assumed more serious proportions, continuing all day and almost every night. The remonstrances of my friends terminated in a row, and I became a lone wolf. So, like a remonstrance is like protests, like not like they were telling him, Bill, you got to chill, you got to slow down, you got to stop, you got to stop. But he just basically ended those friendships until he was a lone wolf, right? Which is true. If you think about our drinking or whatever, for the purpose of this, we're talking about alcohol and alcoholism. Um, and we don't want to hear it, when we're in it and we're having a good time and we're drinking and carrying on in the, beginning, middle-ish times. We're like, yeah, dude, if you don't like it, fuck off, like then we don't have to be friends. I'm not going to change for you. Look at how successful I am. I'm a millionaire. That's what Bill's saying. Or whatever it is. I go to work every day. I got a nice house. The bills are paid. Whatever our thing is, right? I don't have fucking cirrhosis of the liver. Chill out. And whatever it is that we're saying to justify that we're okay. And then if our friends are not down with that, we just stop hanging out with them until we find ourselves alone. So he's saying, my friends terminated in a row and I became a lone wolf. Which, dude, that's a really poetic way of saying, I lost all my friends because I'm a drunk. I'm a lone wolf. It's like, nah, dude, you're like a fucking possum drowning in a trash can after a rainstorm. Okay. At least I was like that. There were many unhappy scenes in our sumptuous apartment. There had been no real infidelity, for loyalty to my wife, helped at times by extreme drunkenness, kept me out of those scrapes. In 1929, I contracted golf fever. So this just means he liked to play golf. We went at once to the country. My wife to applaud while I started out to overtake Walter Hagen. So if we were putting it in today's terms, my wife to applaud while I set out to overtake Tiger Woods, right? Like to become the best golfer in the world, which is ridiculous. But that's what's going on in his head. He's like giving you a peek into his mind. My wife to applaud while I become a professional golfer. No, that's not what was happening, dude. You're drunk. You moved out to the country. Your wife is going because she's a loyal, loving woman, right? And you're playing golf all day. You think your wife was happy? What's up, buddy? One second. Go on, dude. Well, there you go. I guess that's what happens. I guess that's what happens when it's live. Okay, I'm not going to edit that, but that's the cat. He wanted to leave, so that's what Bill's saying. It's very pompous and arrogant and delusional, right? Is what he's explaining. He contracted golf fever. They move out to the country. My wife to applaud while I started out to overtake Walter Hagen or Tiger Woods or whatever in our modern day talk. Liquor caught up with me much faster than I came up behind Walter. So I started having problems with alcohol much faster than I got good at golf, is what he's saying. I began to be jittery in the morning. Golf permitted drinking every day and every night. It was fun to carom around the exclusive course, which had inspired such awe in me as a lad. And carom is a funny word when you look it up because it's like to carom is like billiard balls, like to bounce things off of something else, right? To carom around. So it's like to think of him like, caromming around a course, drunk and bobbling around, um, bouncing around, So that's it funny that he chose that word, that he chose that word. And he's on this, exclusive golf course, and he's still kind of saying, I'm the man. I acquired the impeccable coat of tan one sees upon the well to do. The local banker watched me whirl fat checks in and out of his till with amused skepticism. So he's like cashing big checks. The local banker's like, okay, buddy, but Bill's like, I'm rich, right? So that's what's going on with Bill Wilson. Okay. Up to this point. Drinking a lot, still made it, still successful. Nobody can really tell him what to do, like that he has a problem because he's successful. He's starting to slippery slope, as we call it. So abruptly, in October 1929, hell broke loose on the New York Stock Exchange. After one of those days of inferno, I wobbled from a hotel bar to a brokerage office. It was 8 o'clock, 5 hours after the market closed. The ticker still clattered, like the paper that comes out with all the symbols telling you what's going on in the stock market. I was staring at an inch of the tape which bore the inscription XYZ negative 32. So, like, whatever it was, right? Like Tesla negative 32. It had been plus 52 that morning. So, the value of this particular company is looking at had dropped to from 52 in the morning to negative 32 by 8 o'clock at night. The stock market crashed. All right. So, that's October 1929. He's talking about the stock market crash. I was finished, and so were many friends. The papers reported men jumping to their death from the towers of high finance. That disgusted me. I would not jump. I went back to the bar. That's what Bill says, right? Which is funny because, like, here are these guys, like, their fortunes are gone. They're just jumping off a building, right? And they're like, killing themselves. That's what he's saying in this book. And he says that disgusted him. I would not jump. I went back to the bar, right? Which was just the slower form of suicide, which at the time he was like, "Huh, I would never kill myself." But then he went and did that. He was just doing it very, very slowly. My friends had dropped several million since 10 o'clock. So what? Tomorrow was another day. As I drank, the old fierce determination to win came back. Next morning, I telephoned a friend in Montreal. He had plenty of money left and thought I had better go to Canada. By the following spring, we were living in our accustomed style. I felt like Napoleon returning from Elba. No, St. Helena for me. These are his historic references. But he felt like Napoleon right after winning a battle. But drinking caught up with me again, and my generous friend had to let me go. This time, we stayed broke. So he got a second chance. The US stock market crashed. He connected with a buddy who was in Canada. They he started making money again. They're accustomed to living in their normal style, having some money, doing what they want, golfing, drinking, carrying on. But that his drinking progressed as it does, and that friend he was working with fired him or let him go. This time we stayed broke. So this is kind of like he's getting into how it gets dark, like the days of saying I'm okay are over. We went to live with my wife's parents. I found a job, then lost it as the result of a brawl with a taxi driver. Mercifully, no one could guess that I was to have no real employment for 5 years or hardly draw a sober breath. My wife began to work in the department store, coming home exhausted to find me drunk. Okay, so this is where Bill starts to, like, it's all downhill from here. All right. And not in the good way. Um, my wife began to work in a department store, which in like the early 30s was not common. It was becoming more common, I guess, but it was not common for the wife to work. I mean, he was just recently a millionaire, and now his wife is working in a department store, and he can't hold a job because of his drinking. I became an unwelcome hanger on at brokerage places. Liquor ceased to be a luxury. It became a necessity. Okay, so this is an interesting thing I heard one time is drink like addiction or drinking starts out fun, it becomes a habit and ends up being a need. Okay? Drinking, partying, drugs, whatever, if we get addicted to it, It started out fun, it became a habit, it ends up being a need. And that's what Bill is saying. It's a necessity. And recovery or getting sober is the same process backwards. It starts out as a need. I need to get sober because my life is falling apart. I need to go to meetings. I need to go to treatment. I need to do this stuff because otherwise my life is falling apart. Starts out as a need, then it becomes a habit. Then eventually you're like, well, I just go to meetings, every day, multiple times a week. I have a sponsor and I'm working some steps with that. It becomes a habit. You don't really think about it. It's just a habit now. And it ends up being fun. Being sober ends up being fun. A sober life ends up being fun and exciting and fulfilling. But it's the process backward. Getting addicted, fun, habit, necessity, need, recovery, need, habit, fun. It's the same process backwards. Okay. So this a little sidebar. It became a necessity for him. Drinking. Bathtub gin, 2 bottles a day, and often three, got to be routine. So that's what he's saying. Sometimes a small deal would net a few $100s, and I would pay my bills at the bars and delicatessens. So he'd net a few $100 in a deal, and he'd go pay off his tab at the bars so that he could keep drinking. This went on endlessly, and I began to waken very early in the morning, shaking violently. Okay. A tumbler full of gin, followed by half a dozen bottles of beer, would be required if I were to eat any breakfast. Nevertheless, I still thought I could control the situation, and there were periods of sobriety which renewed my wife's hope. So he's saying, dude, that he's having full on DT tremens or tremors, full on alcohol withdrawal before the night's over. So if he passes out at 8 p.m., by 4 in the morning, he's already DTing and he's going through withdrawal and needs to drink gin, 6 beers, if he was to even want to get to eat something for the day. Because otherwise, he'd just be freaking. I don't know if you've ever experienced alcohol withdrawal or benzo withdrawal. It's a nasty bitch. Okay, so, but he said, even in that, there were periods of sobriety which renewed my wife's hope. Gradually, things got worse. Okay. The house was taken over by the mortgage holder. My mother in law died. My wife and father in law became ill. Then I got a promising business opportunity. Stocks were at the low point of 1932, and I had somehow formed a group to buy. I was to share generously in the profits. Then I went on a prodigious bender and the chance vanished. So he put together a deal for to buy some stocks. He was going to make a bunch of money, but a couple days before that, he started drinking, which we talk about in the doctor's opinion yesterday, I believe, or the day before. So this is what Bill's saying. He was able to like get it together, and then the doctor. Okay, yeah. So Bill, we can just reference back to the doctor's opinion real quick. Bill saying periods of sobriety. Okay. So he went on a spree. He emerged remorseful with a firm resolution not to drink again. He was able to not drink for a period of time and then took a drink a couple days prior. And the phenomenon of craving became paramount to all other thoughts or all other objectives. Remember? So in the doctor's opinion, it says I have had many men who had, for example, worked a period of months on some problem or business deal, which was to be settled on a certain date favorable to them. That's what Bill is saying. I got a promising business opportunity. Stocks were at the low point. I had somehow formed a group to buy. I was to share generously in the profits. Then they took a drink a day or so prior to the date, and then the phenomenon of craving at once became paramount to all other interests, so that the important appointment was not met. So that's from the doctor's opinion. This is Bill. Then I went on a prodigious bender and the chance vanished. So this is what the doctor's opinion is talking about. Bill went through these things, okay? And now we can point back and go, that's what that was. Oh, wow. Holy shit. That's cool. All right. So the chance vanished. I woke up. This had to be stopped. I saw I could not take so much as one drink. I was through forever. Before then, I had written lots of sweet promises, but my wife happily observed that this time I meant business. And so I did. He emerged from a spree, emerging remorseful with a firm resolution not to drink again. This is repeated over and over unless this person can experience the entire psychic change. Bill has not experienced the psychic change yet. He's just going through sprees. He gets it together, firm resolution. He says, this time I meant business. And he meant it. He meant it truly. I'm not going to drink again. I can't stand seeing my wife like this. And we've probably felt like this at some point. I don't want to hurt these people or myself anymore. It's a firm resolution not to drink. Shortly afterward, I came home drunk. There had been no fight, he says. Where had been my high resolve? I simply didn't know. It hadn't even come to mind. Someone had pushed a drink my way and I had taken it. Was I crazy? So that's I began to wonder, for such an appalling lack of perspective seemed near being just that. Okay. So I'm going to mark this here and part one. All right. But that's awesome, man, because it's right there, and we don't have to go back that far to find it in the doctor's opinion, right? So I'm like flipping back between Bill's story and the doctor's opinion, because they're pointing to each other. You know, Bill's talking about he's telling us his story, and you can go back and go, oh yeah, that was a spree. How many times have I done that? So firm resolution not to drink again. He meant it. Truly, he meant it from the bottom of his heart. He meant it. He wasn't lying. Someone pushes a drink across the table and he drinks it without a thought. So that's what an alcoholic deals with, is that it's not that we don't care. It's not that always we say fuck it or I don't care about these people that I love. It's just the mental defense against taking a drink vanishes. And then we're like, it's some kind of thing that we have, that an average temperate drinker does not experience. So he's saying, there had been no fight. He wasn't sitting at the bar. Some guy goes, "Hey, Bill, here you go, whiskey," and he goes, "No, man, I just blew a huge deal that I would have made a bunch of money on. Like, I've been fighting with my wife. My wife works at a freaking department store down the street. I can barely. I lost the house. My mother-in-law died. My father-in-law's sick. My wife is sick. Like, no way, dude. No way. No, thank you, but I'm not drinking. None of that happened. He just took the drink." So he's saying, like, I began to think I'm crazy. Was I crazy? I began to wonder, for such an appalling lack of perspective seemed near being just that. So, such an appalling lack of being able to go, wait a minute, I probably shouldn't have that drink. Like he's saying, I must be crazy. Okay. And I think that that's good for part one of Bill's story. This might be like three parts, dude. Bill's story is still, we got a bunch of pages. But all right, yeah, that's it. Bill's story, part one. Bill is in the progression of alcoholism. So that's also why Bill's story is really illuminating too, because it shows you the progression. Alcoholism would be considered a chronic progressive illness, meaning chronic, it's never eradicated from the system. It's chronic, it'll be there forever, and it's progressive. It gets worse over time. Okay, it's a chronic progressive illness. But the good news is that it can be arrested, it can be put in remission, alcoholism can appear non-existent in the person who has it if they're doing certain things, which is all outlined in this book. And that's the main point of all of this, is that if you are drinking now, or if you're in early recovery, or whatever the situation is, right? is we can do the things outlined in this book, and it's going to, number one, make our alcoholism seem like it doesn't exist, but we have to remember that it does. It's a chronic progressive illness. So it's like the thing we were talking about before, like I'll never not be allergic to peanuts. I'll always be allergic to peanuts. It doesn't matter if I don't eat peanuts for 30 years. I'll be allergic to them in 30 years. So what I have to do is not eat peanuts if I don't want to almost die. Okay. Now that's an example. I'm not personally allergic to peanuts. I'm using that as an example. So the same thing with alcohol. If we buy into this idea that it's an allergy, I have an allergy to alcohol. The allergy is the manifestation of a craving to drink. The craving overtakes our mental state to where it becomes paramount to all other things is to drink more, keep drinking. If we buy into that, then I have an allergy to alcohol. So if I had an allergy to peanuts and I almost die every time I eat peanuts, I should not eat peanuts. I should not even go to a peanut factory where they make shit with peanuts. I can't even eat a thing that was made in the same vicinity as where a peanut might be. Like that's how specific it has to get. So in the early days of recovery, maybe I should avoid all things alcohol if my problem seems to be that I have a problem with alcohol, and if I have this allergy that manifests as a craving as soon as I introduce alcohol into my system, maybe I should be really cautious to avoid alcohol for like all together in all forms. Maybe not go to the bar, maybe not go to the wedding, whatever it is, not forever, because eventually we're gonna do this process and we're gonna be able to safely go anywhere in the world without having to worry about this insidious urge to drink. The obsession to drink can be removed, and we can make the symptoms of alcoholism seem almost non existent as long as we remember that it's a chronic thing that never goes away. We just keep it in remission. Okay. If we do certain things on a daily basis, one day at a time, we can put this thing in remission and keep it under control to where we can live a happy, fulfilling, functional, exciting, happy life. I think that is what's possible for us. It's not like a whole lifetime of wanting to drink and I can't. It's like, it's been 18 years for me and I don't want to drink. I don't want to, you know. I have no desire for it. My life is fulfilling the way it is, and I feel like if I drank, even if I was, let's say, fine, what's it going to add to my life? What's it going to do for me that I can't already experience? I don't get it. I know what it's like to be drunk. I did it. I did it for a bunch of years when I was young, when I was, invincible apparently. And I luckily didn't get in any crazy trouble and I didn't hurt anybody, permanently injure anybody or myself. But I did all the crazy things. I crashed the cars, I flipped the cars, I did all the silly, crazy things. Um, And today I have a different kind of life that's fulfilling. I do the shit that's in this thing, right? That was written 91 years ago ish, right? And and it still works today. So that's what I'll do. I'll just keep reading through it and hopefully it's a good thing, you know? All right. See you tomorrow.